Hello, my name is Jeremy, and I've been attending Saipan Community Church for about 2 years now. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I came to be at Saipan Community Church and what it's meant for me. But first, I'd like to tell you a little bit about where I came from and how I got here. So, I grew up in a small town in Ohio in a religious family. We attended a Lutheran church called St. John Lutheran Church where I was baptized and confirmed. And I would say that when I was little, I was really religious, and as was my mom, and she was always an inspiration for me. And that was really what characterized my childhood. And I remember on our wall we had the poem Footprints in the Sand, and if you're familiar with it, you know what I'm talking about. Well, I'd say after I went through school, especially after I went through graduate school, you know, being a scientist and I studied anthropology, and I really began to question my faith when I was in school, and it only became worse and worse afterwards. Also, there were hardships that I would experience that I just I never seemed to get any resolution for, and to be quite frank, I got to the point where I didn't believe miracles happen, and to be honest, I got to the point where I began to think that prayer wasn't even worthwhile, and that really took a turning point when my mom died. And when that happened, I remember my aunt's words vividly. And she said, "You can either use this to bring you closer to God, or you can let it drive you away." And ultimately, I chose the latter path. And that was really kind of the state I was in for years. I didn't attend church, I didn't pray, I just kind of worked, I did my own thing. Well, a number of years ago, I became really good friends uh, with a person named Joy. And I remember her once asking me if I attended church, and I basically told her I hadn't been to church in a long time, and kind of intimated I really didn't have any intention of going back either. Well, I had bounced around to various jobs, traveling around the country, when an opportunity came up for me in the South Pacific, someplace called Saipan, that I had never heard of, but I knew it was in the South Pacific. I always wanted to work in the South Pacific, and I decided to apply for the job, because I wanted to see what kind of opportunities might be in store for me. I was working in North Dakota at the time for the tribe, and I was still talking to Joy at this time. And there was one day I was going to work, and I get this frantic text from Joy saying that her best friend named Jenny was about to die from cancer, and that she needed $2,000 to for them to do the operation. And admittedly, I was kind of taken aback, and it was so sudden. I was on my way to work, and I was hesitant and reluctant because I didn't really know what was going on. Well, I was in a meeting at work that day when I got a text from Joy saying, Jenny's dead. And I can't tell you how that made me feel. That I could have potentially prevented that. I mean, she needed $2,000 to save her life, and I was reluctant to send it. Why? Because I wanted to go to Saipan, and I needed the money to travel. And I was worried about that. And I put that above what I should have done. And that decision has haunted me ever since. Well, I eventually did get to Saipan. And shortly after I arrived here, I got a text from Joy that her nose was bleeding. And I tried to play it off. I was like, well, just pinch your nose and hold your head down and it'll stop. But it wasn't stopping. So her neighbor took her to the hospital, and they needed a lot of money for some medications and everything. And I really was all Joy had. So I sent everything that I had. It turns out she has very acute high blood pressure. She had gone into a coma and she needed surgery immediately. So like I said, I basically sent all the money I had in my bank account so she could have this surgery. And when I was at work, thinking about her, worrying about her, I realized that she needed something more than I myself couldn't provide. And for the first time, in a long time, I felt like I had lost control. That there was nothing I could do to help her. And so, for the first time in about 13 years, I prayed. And I prayed. And I prayed that she would come through it. God answered my prayers. She came through that. But she was in a condition that this was something that was a recurring problem. And she needed constant medications that were costly, and I have been, for the last 2 years, trying to put everything that I can to help her with those medications. Well, after that surgery, again, realizing that Joy needed more than just what I could provide, which wasn't much. I knew I needed to turn to God, and that I needed to show my commitment to Him once again. And so I began to look for churches here in Saipan that I could attend. Keeping in mind, I hadn't been to church in a long time. So I started looking on Google Maps and looking at some of the reviews. They don't have a Lutheran church here, so. But what I did find is this one church that had some really, really great reviews. It was a church on the beach. It was an open church. It had a view of the beach and the ocean. And I thought to myself, that's me. That's my style. That's where I want to go. I want to check this place out. This sounds great. And so that's where I went. There's a place, this little church on Beach Road called Saipan Community Church. Now, the first time I drove up, I just kind of wanted to check it out and see what it was. I was a little timid at first. The service was already going because I didn't know when the service started. I just kind of drove into the parking lot, saw people were there, and honestly, I just kind of turned around and went back home. But I told myself, next Sunday, you need to go in there. This is what I need to do. And so I did. I went there, I went early. I found a seat kind of off to the side near the back because I figured I'd be somewhat inconspicuous there. And this man saw me sitting there, and introduced himself. And I didn't realize at first until he introduced himself that it was Pastor Steve Dame. Welcome me to the church. And asking me about who I was and a bit about who I am and what brought me to his church, and just kind of welcomed me with open arms. And I remember that. But it wasn't just that I would remember. It was the message that he delivered as well. Because the reason I went there is I was in great pain. I had a huge burden with my friend who I didn't know if she would live or die. And I was there for the first time in a long time to a church, asking God for His grace and His mercy on her. And that first message that he delivered, that I heard anyway, was about hope. It was about hope when everything looks desperate and hopeless. And he used a story about Jeremiah, where Jeremiah was commanded by God to purchase property as the Babylonians were sieging Jerusalem and destroying everything in sight. Mainly, most importantly, all the property. But yet, Jeremiah went purchased land because he was had his faith in God, and he knew that in the end, after everything, all the turmoil and hardship, that there was promise in the future. And that is what really made me connected to Saipan Community Church. And I knew that that was the place where I needed to be. And so I started attending regularly. And there was this event, not long after I started attending there. It was an event that Pastor Steve had arranged called the Power Team. And he was asking for volunteers to act as witnesses, to take people's testimonies and to help them sign these commitment cards and help bring them to Christ. Well, something moved me and told me that I needed to do that. I had never done anything like that in my life. But I was moved in that moment to volunteer to be one of those people to help bring people to Christ. So there were several nights that the Power Team was going to be putting on this performance, and I think I volunteered for one of them. And when we were doing it, I was really nervous. So we were supposed to collect these cards. We were supposed to talk to as many people as we could. And so I went forth to try to talk to these people and bring them to Christ. And you know what? I ended up talking to just one. But that experience and seeing that person and talking to them and knowing that they were giving their life to Christ was an incredibly moving experience for me. And so I quickly volunteered to help out more nights with the Power Team. And I began to talk to more people. Well, it wasn't long after that Pastor Steve approached me and said, if you'd like to be more involved in the church, there are opportunities for you to do that. And I said, sure. What would you like me to do? I'll do it. And it was helping to set up the sound equipment on Sunday morning. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. That's easy. Sure, I can do that. And so I've been helping with that ever since. And then there were other opportunities that came up as well. So I was asked to be a worship leader. And I've been doing that. We rotate worship leaders every week, but about once a month I act as the worship leader. And when we had Vacation Bible School last year, I was asked by the person who's going to be the director if I would be a teacher for Vacation Bible School. My last experience with Vacation Bible School was when I was in it, when I was in 5th grade. But you know what? I said, I'll do it. And I was also asked to join the praise team. And I've never been much of a singer. Well, I guess I did used to be part of the Junior Choral Society, but most certainly not in recent years been much of a singer, other than maybe in the shower when I was singing to myself and I thought nobody was hearing. But I've been doing that as well. And it's been such an incredible experience. But, and there, one thing about Saipan Community Church is it has offered many opportunities for me. But even through all this, I continued to carry that burden. So it wasn't just the opportunity that was being offered, but it was the spiritual guidance I was receiving as well. I had, through all this, a transformational experience. Because going back to my friend Joy, who has been struggling this whole time, and I've never lost sight of her struggles and what I need to do to help her. And the burden has been great. And to be honest, I every paycheck I get, because her needs are so great, most of my money goes to her. And there are many, many times I had to put off my own expenses, including my rent, my internet, my phone, my storage units. I put off all that so that I could help pay her medical expenses, which are onerous. And honestly, they put me under so much stress. And people can see the pain that I go through. I try to be in good spirits, but it's hard as I struggle to continue to help her. The reason I help her is because I vowed that I could not let happen to her what happened to her friend Jenny. And I promised I would never, as long as I had life in my body, give up on her, since I was all she had. Well, there was one day that I got a message from Joy's doctor saying that there's this little girl that was stopped by her bedside and just told her that everything would be alright. Now, nobody knew who this girl was. And I didn't really think anything of it. I guess it's just a little girl being a little girl. But I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's really unusual, but well, it wasn't long after that Joy had another episode where she went into a coma again. Because again, if she doesn't have her meds for a day, and sometimes even if she does, this happens. And she was teetering between life and death. was worried, deeply concerned, praying to God. And I made a promise to God that was just between God and myself. That if He brought her through this, that I would do everything I could to bring her here, to bring Joy here. I could watch over her. Well, Joy, thanks be to God, survived it. Even though, honestly, I didn't think she would. I thought I kind of lost hope. Many times I was at that state where I lost hope. But she came through it. It wasn't long after that this little girl came back. And she said to the doctor, well, she quoted this scripture, which I'm going to read to you. This is from Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 4. And it states, "When you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it, for He has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Let not your mouth lead you into sin, and do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry at your voice and destroy the work of your hands? For when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity. But God is the one you must fear." And I was reading that in a text from the doctor. And I was looking at that in complete disbelief for what felt like 10 minutes or so. Because, let me tell you, there was only 2 people that knew I made that vow. Me and God. And somehow, some little girl in Nebraska was saying to the doctor that I needed to keep it. The doctor texted me and said, "I don't know what any of this means." And I texted her back and said, "It doesn't matter if you know what it means. Because the message wasn't meant for you. It was meant for me." And that was when I realized that this was no ordinary girl. I can't explain it. And I don't know if I want to speculate. But I personally believe she was sent by God. There was another incident. Well, Joy started having these issues where she started having seizures as well. And the condition continued to get worse and worse. And admittedly, more and more expensive as more and more medications were needed. She had one of these seizures and she went again into another coma, teetering once again between life and death. And the doctor texted me frantically saying, "Well, we need this medication now, or she's not going to make it." She's like, "And it may already be too late." And she will text me this all the time, but she said, "Joy's not breathing." And what I had to do, I, this was just after one of the darkest moments of my life here. You see, because the program that I came out here to work at had just closed. And fortunately, I was able to pick up another job at CUC. They created a position for me. But I hadn't yet been paid. It had been about a month since I'd been paid. And I didn't know how I was going to come up with the money. And I was desperate. And I was asking everybody if they could help. Well, my coworker has a friend that lends money to people with a very nominal interest to repay. And I asked him that day, "Do you think your friend will lend me some money? I can't let her die." And God will find a way. Because she agreed to lend me money to help save her life. So I quickly deposited money. I sent it to the doctor to get what she needed. Again, not knowing if she was going to make it through the night. And I said to the doctor, "Well, if that little girl comes by, then I know everything will be all right." And the doctor said to me, "Well, I haven't seen her in a while, but I'll pray." That morning, I had a text from the doctor saying, "You will never believe this, but that little girl came back today, shouting at the top of her lungs, 'Trust in the Lord. Trust in the Lord. Trust in the Lord.'" And so that's what I did. I placed my trust in the Lord. I prayed and I trusted. And He answered that prayer, as He has every other time. Well, all this has been an ultimately transformative experience for me, as you can imagine. Because it changed what I thought and challenged everything that I thought about miracles never happening and prayer not being worthwhile. And how wrong I was. And I started seeing all these miracles. Let me share one more miracle that just happened. Because as I've been struggling and the expenses have been getting more and more, I have told the doctor over and over, I cannot maintain this. I'm just one person. The expenses have exceeded what I'm making. I had by this time gotten a second job. I've been working two jobs, two full-time jobs, to generate all the money I can to help her, which I thought would be the answer to help Joy, because we've been trying to get this supplement for her, which is kind of expensive. So when I got this second job, I thought, well, this will be relatively easy for me to save up money to get this supplement for her. But instead, the spending has increased like tenfold. Once again, where I have begun to lose hope. And I've expressed that, my frustration, my fear, my concern to the doctor, that it's hopeless. And I can't keep up with these expenses anymore. It's like I thought this second job was going to be the answer, but instead, the spending has just increased. There's no way we're going to win this. But it doesn't stop the doctor from telling me I need to come up with the money somehow. I need to help her. I need to find a way. That's the burden I bear. So one morning I wake up and I look at my bank account. And this, by the way, this is after I had sent out my money. I had sent out my money for what I could, what medications we could get her. Even though I knew it wasn't enough. I wake up and look at my bank account again, expecting it to be at zero. Because that's where it should have been. But somehow, I had $5,000 in my account. I was like, well, sometimes this happens with my bank. They'll, especially over weekends, sometimes there'll be more in there, and then they'll just adjust the amount later, right? So I thought, well, this is just a mistake. It's an accounting error. It's gonna go back down. So I'll just let it be. Let it fix itself. And then the next week, there was a little more in there. And I was like, well, this is still, they're gonna figure this out eventually. And then it just continued to be a little bit more and more that was appearing in my account. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm a little fearful that they might take it back, but I've also come to realize now, or it dawned on me. Because you see, about 2 weeks ago, I prayed a prayer. And I do this a lot. So I've been attending Bible study regularly at Saipan Community Church. These are led by Pastor Steve, and they've been remarkable experiences for me as I learn more and more about the Bible. I kind of equate it to being catechism for adults. And I haven't learned so much about the Bible since I was in catechism, to be honest. But before Bible study every week, I go into the chapel and I pray. I always say a prayer for Joy. one of my prayers was, Lord, this burden is too great for me. I ask you to take the burden from me, or to help me find a way to help Joy. And this is what happened. Trust in the Lord. The Lord will provide. We talked about this at one of the Bible studies when Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac. And the Lord intervened right at the last minute, right before that knife was about to pierce his chest. This is after Abraham told Isaac, when he inquired about where the ram was for the sacrifice. Abraham told Isaac, the Lord will provide. And he provided a ram in his place. Pastor Steve has had many messages that have resonated with me. But I think there's one particular one that has really stuck with me. He said, God uses hardships to bring us closer to Him. And he has said this many times. And in some ways, I think it's because it was a message that I needed to hear. Because of the hardship that I've been going through the last 2 years and the hopelessness that I've been experiencing. And it dawned on me that he is absolutely 100% correct. Because this hardship that I've been going through, trying to help my friend Joy, that is what brought me to Saipan Community Church. And it was because of that, and because of my experience at Saipan Community Church, that I came back to my faith. And my life has been forever changed as a result. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this was inspirational to you. God bless you all.